Welcome back. We are continuing our time with my sister and brother-in-law. And we had a couple of things we wanted to talk about specifically with Mike. I'll let him share, but just in the last video, we talked about how the church would handle visitors and people. They would deem from like the beginning whether they wanted them there, or whether they didn't want them there, if they were going to deem them good or bad or whatever. Because you have a very interesting testimony and story because of that church and your experience there, and then where you went after, and really the real testimony of like the Lord actually doing things versus the church like kicking you out.
Yeah.
But so how did you how did that all start? How did that come about for you to visit, and then what happened?
Yeah, time? So there is a beginning, of course, just like all stories. I met Christin at my work. We both were working at the same time. Really didn't think much about, a relationship or anything. I was really focused on work. And so just time getting to know her, I was like, well, she seems pretty neat. I think I like her some. And, it took a while. We would talk, on and off. She would see me sometimes. I would message her. She would message back. And it just kind of was this thing. And then eventually we did start talking a little bit more on a consistent basis. We decided to maybe go on a little date. I was like, no pressure. We could just, she was telling me that she was having issues, or she had issues with her relationship in the past. And in my mind, I think, oh, well, yeah, guys can be jerks. I'm sure there was a guy that probably broke her heart. That's awful. I will respect it and not try to pursue too hard because I'm thinking it's a guy. And so it was a guy.
It was a guy.
It was a guy. It's just not the way I thought. And so we go on I call it our first official date. We go to a because we were going to a restaurant. We were going to a movie afterwards. So official, like classic date. And so getting ready for the date, I get a call from my future brother-in-law that he wants to meet. And, we had already kind of, I thought, had a bit of a relationship. So he knew kind of who I was. And when he said that, I was like, I text Christin. I was like, your brother wants to get together to talk to me. And it was just very confusing. So I was like, Christin replied and said it would mean a lot to her if I did. So I really liked her. Yes, let's go. Where can we meet? And so we do. We talk for a little while. At the end, he was saying that, Christin's not in the best spot for a relationship. And again, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this guy, this ex-boyfriend messed all this up. And I think it's really cool. In my mind, I'm like that her brother cares about her so much that he wants to talk to me. I have an older sister as well. And I understand that like protectiveness of your sibling. So I told him, okay, I want to go on this date. And then afterwards, I'll tell her maybe we could slow it down some. We go on the date. Stuff happens during the date. It did not end well. We stayed talking in the car for a little while, and she was starting to act in a way I've never seen before up until this point, where she's crying, very emotional. I'm very confused. I'm just kind of like sitting there trying to comfort her while trying to understand what's happening. This girl I've known for almost 6 months is now like bawling, and she isn't not making sense to me then because she wasn't. I don't even think she really knew how to call it and what was going on with her. Mm-mm. And so,
should I give a little context that I had been like bad for a year? So like in the way that I explained in the last video where
you were lost again.
I was lost again. Okay. So
again.
And the reason, there's a whole story behind that, which is a whole interesting thing. But anyway, I was a very bad person again. I was mentally being told that I had multiple personality disorder. I was emotionally stunted. I was psychologically completely messed up, obviously spiritually messed up. So I was not in a very good place in a lot of ways. And I was also being treated like a pariah in the church place, and being introduced as a visitor every Sunday and Wednesday, when I have literally been born and raised in there, but they were introducing me by name every Sunday as a visitor to make sure the shame was extra apparent. So in this time, I was not claiming to be saved. I was very confused. You don't know a lot about Christianity or things of God or anything. And I don't really know exactly how to process what's going on because I'm just like in a very confused place. But I have had relationships in the past while in this place, with guys who weren't part of it, but they joined or would date me kind of while not being part of it. And they all ended really bad, really poorly, a lot of times because of intervention from the people in the leadership. Yeah. And so I had a lot of trauma in my body associated with that
I had no idea.
he didn't know. So he's just seeing me be like a crazy person. And I don't exactly know what's going on myself because I'm actually still at that point, I'm still attending and trying to, as much as I possibly can, even though I'm a bad, lost, non-member, still participate as much as I can in the hopes that maybe one day I will be able to be saved and be part of it again.
Let's talk about the be saved part, because what did being saved mean to you after the many times you were lost saved?
Right. Well, because at that point I knew it wasn't like I didn't want to be saved. It was all I wanted. I actually even went to one of the pastor's houses and they wouldn't let me in their house because I'm so terrible. I had to sit on their front porch and I had to pray to be saved in front of them. It's probably for 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour. And it was awful because they would then critique what I had done and tell me how it wasn't real enough, or it was this, or it was that. And they would just look at me. I'd finish and just look at me like, because for me,
this was right before you left. Like
this was that year. In that year, I was a bad person for like a year. I was a pariah for a year. Anyway, I thought for being saved was confusing because I know the Bible says, confess with your mouth, believe in your heart, and you shall be saved. Confess with your mouth. But at the same time, like, I also knew it meant complying with everything that they were doing in there. And I had this weird mental disconnect where anytime I wanted to go forward, because I did try a couple times, I would go forward, but it was like I was shut down, or it just was like, it wasn't, I was just like trying to do it because I wanted to be back in the good graces, but it wasn't really there. What I mean by it wasn't there, it was just like, I was afraid also because I didn't really want to be a part of the church again because of what it was like. So I would think about going forward and I would think, well, if I truly get saved, I won't question things anymore. I will be okay with how the pastors do everything. I'll be okay with everything, right? But then it was like the other part of me knew it's not okay. And I bet you even if I get saved, I'm still going to have issues and it's still going to come up again. Because what would always happen is I'd get saved and then I would try to it would be like, oh, well, I'm saved now. So I don't have any of these issues. Like, I'm not concerned about these issues anymore because I now know and understand authority. Because you'd always say that you understand authority when you're really saved. But then inevitably months would pass, years would pass, whatever, and things would happen that were not setting right in my spirit, and looking at it biblically now weren't right. And then I would be confused again. Well, how could I be questioning? That means I'm not saved. So I just knew that cycle would happen again. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I think I was 33, and I think mentally I was at a breaking point where I just couldn't do their formula of saved again, which meant accepting everything that they said was good.
Actual salvation.
It wasn't real salvation. Mm-hmm. It was accepting everything they said was right. And I knew if I prayed to be saved and it was accepted by them or tolerated by them, I would get up and I'd have to engage with the pastor again as if everything he'd done and the ways he treated me, calling me a queen bee bitch, doing all kinds of things in front of people that were incredibly humiliating and cruel and not biblical, lording over, as Peter said, don't do, filthy lucre, like all these things. I knew I would have to act like none of that had happened. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And so then they would yell at me and get mad at me and say I'm so horrible and I'm rejecting and all this. And it was like, I don't know what to do.
But what's interesting is that, like, in that time, I remember you were still there, and like you're saying, you're kind of like trying to see, like, you had hopes of I want to be saved or whatever.
Yeah.
But in your mind too, you were like, okay, well, even if I can't get saved, maybe I can bring somebody else and they can get saved.
Yes, because
so you're thinking, well, okay, I am at least going to this church that preaches Jesus and the gospel. So if I like this guy, then maybe I can bring him and he can get saved and then maybe something can happen there.
Actually, I was thinking, I was so messed up in there that I was like, well, I think they do preach the gospel. And they do. So, and the word doesn't return void. So, people who have gotten saved, those of us who have gotten saved in there somehow, it's because the word does the work. God does the work.
God's bigger than all that.
He's bigger than all that. But anyway, they don't live the gospel. They do preach it. Anyway, so I was thinking, well, I know I'm seeing this guy and he's a neat guy. He's really tender towards things of God. When I talk about it, he's very open. It seems like a really neat guy. And I can see brokenness there. I see things that he's been through that we're like, oh man, I know that there's a real God that can heal these things. And so I'm thinking, I don't plan to leave. I'm going to bring him and his family to church. We're going to start dating and I can bring him to church. I'm a visitor. I don't have to do, I can date whoever I want to date. I'm not, whatever. And maybe God will save him and he can minister to me. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Wow.
He can minister to me because maybe he can get through to me in a way that I just can't. There's something I can't handle it with these people in here. It's just too much. I can't.
And so that was
going
my
back initial intention.
Right. That night, I think the next day is when you came.
The next day was Sunday.
Yeah.
And the Saturday evening before we left each other, she asked me, would you come to church? And I've never hated God or anything. I grew up in a Catholic household, so I knew and heard the word God. Not so much Jesus, but God itself. And I knew, in my head, it is a works-based thing. Like you earn something. These are all the things I just knew. So I was like, I'll go to church. I'll give it a shot. I like you a lot. And yeah, let me see what this Jesus guy is all about. It's kind of what I was thinking,
Yeah.
And so the next day, get ready, head over to church. And I know Christin is there, but I purposefully do not sit with her. I go to the front. I sit near Jonathan and Joe, literally. And I just want to hear the word. I don't want it to be this thing where I'm like joking around with Christin or something. I just don't know. I haven't been to church at this point in almost 20 years. So this is my first church experience in 20 years. I had the hair done. I had the shirt on, full on thinking this is how you come to church. I go, I hear the word. And again, like they said, they preached the gospel. What I heard was very much impactful to me.
I remember you crying. I remember giving you tissues. I remember crying. I remember thinking, man, this is so cool. Mike can get saved.
Yeah.
I remember being so excited.
Because I knew the Lord cared about him and loved him and
then,
wanted to save him.
Yeah. And it was very emotional. And
I did.
Afterwards,
And you
I was emotional.
you're standing around talking with people.
I didn't know. I've never churched as an adult, as a real adult. So the words were just it's the words of God. Like they pierced through, and what they were preaching was very much so hitting me. It's like God had me there so I could hear that message. I was seeing it. And then, it ends. We all get together. Jonathan's introducing me to everybody. And, the lead, I don't realize that what do y'all call him? The pastor emeritus is there. I didn't speak to him. I didn't even know. I just knew there was an older gentleman in the area. I'm not paying attention. There's not that many people in there. I just talked to the people who were talking to me, and they were asking, are you going to come back for the evening service? And I was like, absolutely, I will be back. And so
you came back.
We separate. We come back just a few hours later. And this is something
when everything changed.
Yeah, this is something I remember is this time I walk up with Christin. And as we're going up, I see this older gentleman there. Hey. And he says something. And I'm not knowing who this gentleman is. He's just like, oh, you guys are still talking. And I just say, yup. And keep walking. I don't know this guy. I know he knows Christin, but yes,
I knew what that was. Of course, I had not been speaking with him in a while because we had counseling, and apparently it did not go well, and so we hadn't really been on speaking terms very much when I was a bad person. So him knowing about this situation was not because I had told him, but because through the grapevine he had found out and decided it was terrible that I was talking to Mike, and then passed that along to my brother, who then reached out to Mike in that whole situation. So when he said that, as I'm walking up, it was not to Mike. It was a very intentional, I know. He was saying, I know, and why are you guys still talking? I'm aware. How can you guys still be talking? So it was a very it was a pointed.
His whole point was maneuver. Well, you'll get to this, but his whole point was to separate y'all. He did not like the fact that y'all were talking. He still wanted to have that control in your life.
100%. Even though I wasn't even a member, I was.
Yeah, you were not a member. You weren't anything, but he still had to have that control.
Because he shredded me for wearing pants one time.
Exactly.
And I was a visitor.
But when we would have at this church, visitors come in, it was like spoken. Another thing, it's like spoken. They can come as they are.
Yeah,
but then if you did it, then it's you got it.
Right.
You can't do that.
Flowy,
so,
nice
so you had the service at night.
The night service, I knew that the morning service was recorded, and I was like, oh, the evening one isn't. But it's because the gentleman that was outside is preaching, and he moves. He up and down the aisles, and I know their father as well because from my work, I'm like, man, the way this guy's preaching is not hitting me like the guy earlier. This gentleman, the older gentleman, what's his name again?
Pastor Emeritus.
Emeritus, listen, these are all new words for me. Emeritus. He is like hovering and like looking down on their father. And I was just like, seems really strange. As a person who knows nothing, but I was like, this I guess is how church goes. And he's just putting his hands on his shoulders and grabbing him real tight. And just like now, fast forward, I'm realizing why he was doing that to their parent or their father, really their parents. And so service ends and, I go back kind of trying to talk to the people I had met earlier in the morning and saying, I'm going to be back on Wednesday. I know you guys have service on Wednesday. I will be back. And that's kind of where.
So I'll kind of talk about some of what happened, because in this time, we obviously are still going to this church. And so that's why we were all there. And the pastor is basically, so we're actually still there in the church at this point. And I just remember the pastor is basically trying to use me to get y'all to stop talking because I'm your brother and I'm supposed to tell him to cut it off and all this stuff.
And remember, I'm 33.
Yeah, and not a member of the church.
Not a member of the church.
So there was after that service, I was like, hey, you should stop talking and all this stuff. And I think
I want to talk about that.
Yeah, because at that point, when you said to stop talking, that's when I was like, no. I was like, I cannot.
Right.
I was like, I won't stop talking. I respect you as her brother, but I'm talking to her. And my mindset is, because again, I just don't know dynamics. So I'm just like speaking from the way I feel. I'm like, if she doesn't want to talk to me anymore, I will respect it, walk away. Heartbroken, of course, but I will walk away. And so when you said it, I respectfully as I could, said no.
Right.
And then,
and at this point, we'd only gone on like 2 or 3 dates. Yeah. And other than that, we'd just been talking on the phone or text.
And what else happened in the church when they were gone? Because then you were there.
I want to talk about, I want to first talk about that Saturday. So that Saturday, we had plans. In this time, we were still in there. So Saturdays were like super important because all the Saturdays were taken up with like fundraising or business or things like that. So whenever we had a Saturday, we would always really strategically plan that Saturday. Fill it in with as many activities or just errands, life things we needed to do. So I remember we had plans.
So you're saying they used to be filled with fundraising, and now that they weren't, you use that one Saturday for anything good or fun, or that's what you're saying?
Like an escape almost.
Well, I'm just saying it's a Saturday. So we viewed Saturdays as days where we would have fun and we would do those things.
Okay, yeah.
So this is a precious day. This is a precious day that we have. And we still view Saturdays that way because of how bad our Saturdays have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a precious day. So we have plans. I remember in an instant that changing. And Jonathan says to me, he's like, this pastor emeritus is texting me all of a sudden. And he wants me to meet with Mike. And I'm like, okay. And in that text, it was like, okay. You were like, okay, I'll meet with him. That's fine. And he's using in the text messages, he's using, you should be loving your sister. You should be taking care of your sister. This is your response. Like, how could you not do this by now? How could you not even be meeting with Mike by now? So it's like using his affection for Christin against him and be like, what? I should be doing these. I should be doing this. How dare I do it? So I remember it being like you had to do it immediately. There was no delay. There was no delay. You're like, yeah, maybe I'll talk to him. No, it was like he had to go right then. And he had to say these specific words. And if he did not say these specific words, it meant that he didn't care for his sister. Yeah. It meant that he wasn't protecting his sister. It meant all these things.
Say that goes back to the like psychoanalyzing of motivations, feelings, behaviors.
It's emotional abuse.
It was, because it's like, why aren't you feeling certain things?
You're like,
rather than just like, well, this is where we're at or whatever. It's like, what's wrong with you to not have this come out of you? They would always use that phrase.
Oh,
why isn't this coming out of you?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So then it would be like, well, I don't know. And so then you're like, well, and then, and then well, why is that coming out of you?
And you feel all shaky inside.
Yeah, and then you're like questioning everything about yourself, about your...
So that was that Saturday. Mike comes. Mike's moved. I'm like, this is awesome. Maybe Mike will get saved. Maybe that. I'm very hopeful. This is me independent because I'm not having conversations with people. So this is joy independent thought. Okay. then that night, the tone completely changed, as is evidenced by what he said when y'all both walked up together. Basically what happened is y'all had left, at least this is what I remember. It could have been in a different order. Y'all had left the building and were like down at like the parking lot. While we were still in the building, there's a circle. And remember how I talked about the circles? Bad things happen in the circles.
Yeah,
there's a circle. And it's kind of like his parents. And I'm there, but they're not really talking to me. But I still feel the shame of everything because it's my family being shamed. And they're basically like one of the daughter of Pastor Emeritus, the son of Pastor Emeritus, the son-in-law of Pastor Emeritus are all just talking about, how could we not have known? How could we have not done something sooner? We should be ashamed of ourselves. we must, and then I don't know at which point he told you to tell him the
So
thing.
basically,
So this is all directed at y'all too.
Oh,
How
yeah.
did
Yeah.
y'all have not have
Right.
It is also your parents.
Okay.
Y'all's
okay.
parents.
Basically, it was like Mike was this terrible person for Kristen, and like he was on. They were the narrative and what was said was he was only ever going to just get whatever he could out of Kristen, and there would never really be able to be real salvation. He was just there to use and whatever. And so basically the pastor emeritus told me to tell him he could never come back. And then the son was like, well, yeah, he can still watch online and stuff, but he can't, come back. So after he told me that, I think it was like the next day or whatever, before Wednesday, like you said, you were going to come back Wednesday. I had to tell you that. Mm-hmm. And so it just was like, that is so, number one, how can a person or a pastor decide you can't get saved like that? Or if you do, it's going to have to be somewhere else or whatever. And it's like, that is not caring for another person. So after the pastor told me that you couldn't come back, like that was very blatant. Just like, I just was like, this is weird. This is wrong. But he's telling me that, so I have to like follow it. But it's, how, if our heart really is for people to be saved, like how does kicking them out help at all? It just really doesn't. And so like I don't know really what was going on, because you and I did meet again, and we talked another time before I told you that, but like it was just,
and his ethnicity was,
well, yeah, there are reasons
about,
too,
right?
why of like the pastor emeritus did not like interracial relationships, marriages, anything like that. He thought that you were only trying to be with her because you wanted to keep your citizenship or whatever.
Or to get citizenship.
Implying
or to get citizenship.
And not a citizen.
Or like, just like all these things. There were so many things that we could go through that were said about you that you didn't know about at the time.
I had no idea.
And were factually inaccurate.
Completely inaccurate. I mean, things about y'all's relationship, completely inaccurate. Mm-hmm. But like, very not loving.
Yeah, when that Sunday night, after you and I spoke briefly about maybe giving it another break while we were in there in the building, Kristen and I walk out, and I say to her, this is what your brother just said to me. I don't agree with it. I don't think they understand that we have been talking for more than just this last month and a half that we went on like 3 dates. We've been talking since November, and I believe it was
And the thing I also want to say is that I had told everyone but the pastor emeritus. The pastor emeritus was not someone I wanted to have conversations with. But I had told the lead pastor's wife. I had told the other pastor's wife. Mm-hmm. I had told my roommate. I had told you. I had told my parents. So it wasn't like people didn't know about this relationship. And I wouldn't even call it a relationship yet. We were literally talking. Yeah. And I was pretty standoffish still because of everything going on. And, I was dealing with a lot of stuff. And he's not Christian. So there's a reality for me with that. Of course, I wasn't claiming to be Christian, but there's still just a lot. Anyway, so I was like, but I wasn't going to keep it a secret. I was like, I'm going to let everyone know. So I let everyone know. And they had known for a little while.
And that's the thing, is that whenever the pastor emeritus then decides it's wrong, who already knew start blaming the other people who knew.
You have no,
that evening, like I said, I told Kristen what had happened. And then Jonathan comes down into the parking lot kind of to talk to us again. And again, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to stop talking. Now, mind you, I'm not from the South. I'm from the North. So my head is just like, cannot comprehend, like, who is this guy to tell me I can't date his sister? Like, we're not even doing anything. My head is like, also, I'm seeing now Jonathan as the enemy. Like, what is up with you, man? Like, why are you treating me like this? Like, I haven't done anything. Like, we've been super cool.
And wasn't it just like weird?
And it was blowing my mind. And then the weirdest part was when Kristen was like, maybe we shouldn't talk anymore. And I was like, I
It's
couldn't
because
believe it.
none of it from me or from her was really coming from us
No.
that we believed.
And
it
that's
was
what
like
was
we
so
had
confusing.
to
It was coming
say
from
these
the
things.
fear, coming from the fear
Yes.
of the pastor emeritus. And
Yeah.
that fear was carefully curated
Yeah.
over
Over
their
years.
entire life.
Yeah.
And they made
And
it.
it's a fear too that I'm dooming myself.
Yeah, because
If I
that's what's been told to you.
Yeah,
That's
so
what that
I'm
meant.
like, you know, God's not bigger than this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Basically,
you
God's
limited
not
him.
bigger, you know. And so I'm like, because there would always be like, I remember the pastor emeritus doing things like saying things like, you know, making big dramatic statements like, this might be your last night because you've done this, or you know,
Trying
Oh,
to
yeah,
stir
like
up.
fear-
demons will
Fear-mongering.
laugh when they,
For
you know,
sure,
I will
fear-mongering.
weep while the demons laugh, or like just like
100%.
very dramatic statements. And he would say that all the time to me. So I have all of that playing in my mind, and I'm like, this guy, I know he's saying this guy is terrible. He doesn't know jack squat about him, but I know he's saying he's terrible. And my brother is wanting me to do this. And so I also have an emotional pull about you, because I feel like
And
I
that's-
would
He's
feel
not really wanting
guilty. Right,
If
but
he's being told to do
I
it.
am like, there's still
But
that
that's
part of
the
me that knows you're trying to
Mhm.
make it your own.
That's the strategicness of the pastor, because if he knows
Yeah.
if it comes from him, it's not going to mean anything to you. So he tries to use
Well, it
somebody
will mean
else.
something to
It will
her.
But it
mean
won't
something.
It's in
mean
a different
the same.
The
way.
Yeah.
emotional
Yeah.
It's in
component,
a different
it's a
way.
lot harder for me to say to you,
Mhm.
I'm not going to accept your covering, because at that
Yeah,
point,
that was the
which
whole
also
thing.
there's nothing in the Bible anyway. But
It says your brother becomes your covering.
yeah, or covering at all,
all,
isn't
yeah.
in the Bible in that context.
Pastor
Yeah.
emeritus would pick and choose who your covering
Yeah,
was,
And
it
what
always
covering-
a
and
guy,
what covering is.
It was
and
just
like
a
this
man.
whole thing. But
and it just didn't matter
Some
which
man in
man.
your
It was
life.
a man.
some random man. But for me to reject your covering wasn't something like I didn't want it to be personally offending you. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because
Yeah.
I wasn't doing that because of you. I knew who it was,
Right.
and
And it
I
was that one.
couldn't do that
Yeah.
anymore. And then of course it shifted to dad
But-
or whatever.
And what's so
Yeah, I
like
can't even remember all the different times it
It's
changed.
So, number one,
then
like-
it went back to dad.
this is a really good like example. I want you to get into too, like your experience now
Mhm.
and in the past of when you went to church afterwards, because in how like when you were in there, they just cared about you.
Yeah.
That's all they did, is just cared about you, versus the place that you were coming from and you visited one time didn't care for you.
Yeah.
Treated him like trash.
The
Not loving
so
him like
not
Yeah,
growing
like a
up
neighbor.
in
like a
church
neighbor.
or knowing anything about Christianity, you know,
His
when
soul
I
was
when
not
I was
valuable.
when I was told to not come back, I in my head was like, that makes sense. I don't look like the rest of them.
I don't deserve it.
I guess I must have done something wrong. I didn't listen to Jonathan when I was told to not talk to Kristen, so of course I wouldn't be welcome back. I understood that. In my head, I thought nothing wrong. Now we're gonna fast forward months. Now Kristen is out of the church. Her and I have been dating, like we're just dating. We're
We're
boyfriend and
engaged.
girl. No,
When
we're
we go to
oh yeah, we are engaged.
Yeah.
Wow, that's how time just flies. And so yeah, we're engaged. Kristen is being pulled, you know, by the Lord. And again, I am not hard. Even though that situation happened, I had found out a lot more information about this church that they had grown up in, and I was like, oh well, that does not sound right at all.
Mm.
Like even from just a little bit of the Bible we were reading, and just like even the churches we had visited before the church we're at now. So now we've started visiting this church as an engaged couple. And I think our first time going there, we actually meet one of the elders of the church. He comes up, introduces himself, and my wife is like, we're engaged.
Mhm.
And he's like, well, you know, I marry people. And this is our first interaction with this gentleman. And we've been looking for an officiant at this point. And he's like, well, usually what I do is I like to meet with couples, kind of, you know, talk to them about a marriage in a Christian way, you know, the way marriage is.
He
truly
would marry
intended.
people as long as they're either both lost or both saved.
Yeah,
So he's, you know,
You
He
didn't
doesn't-
have to be saved.
he sees it as a ministry to be able to marry couples that aren't saved
Mhm.
in order to be able to like counsel them and minister the gospel to them.
Yeah.
So he didn't see us as like, oh, they're this great. I think he just literally saw us as two people that don't know anything about.
Yeah.
He obviously didn't know my past, but he just, and so he wanted to do that. It was really the Lord.
Amen.
Yeah. So.
And so we start attending this church on a regular basis. We're going, and I think we're there for, we get married. I
he sits down and shares the gospel with you.
Yep.
And separate from me.
Yeah. He and I get together. He, tells me about the gospels. And I remember I sat there and was like, this just sounds too simple. Again, my experience with the Lord and Jesus has been me growing up in a Catholic household where it's all works. It's you are not given salvation. You have to earn it. And then my experience is hearing the stories from people from the church, my wife. I'm like, what you're saying to me does not truly compute. I hear the words, but it's not registering because it's just too simple from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go ahead.
The other thing is that we were reading the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So before we even went to church, it took me a while to feel comfortable to want to go to church. But after I left, it even took me a while to want to read the Bible because there was just a lot of stuff associated with that, including what had happened with the cult. But I knew that the Word of God in and of itself wasn't the church and had power. That the Word doesn't return void. I know it says that, and I know God uses His Word. So I just wanted to read it, and I wanted me to read it, and I wanted him to read it. So we would just sit and read it out loud, and we talk about it. And so we've been doing that for months before we went to church, started going to churches. And then we kept doing it, and we kept doing it after we got married, even after you had met with Dwight, and we were going to the church and stuff, because we were both just working through a lot.
Yeah.
I was working through a lot, but he also was starting to, I think for a while it was like, well, I will go with you because you're doing this. But then I think slowly with time, you started to like see what the church was like, how these people were treating you, that there was something real there. And it started to be something you were kind of wanting.
Yeah.
Right?
When we would start going to this church, I was just like, these people are so nice. And they're just like nice people. I've known nice people growing up, but it started to shift. My mindset started to shift where I'm like, I'm hearing, the gospels, and I'm just like, these people seem to be a reflection of Christ. Because the way they're not hating me, they're not beating me down, they're not saying, well, you're lost, get out of here, bud, go figure it out on your own. They just loved on me and us, even though they knew I was lost and they knew I didn't know the Lord. But through them, the way God just used all of them to show me who he truly was. And there was a lot of stuff happening that I'm sure we'll get into in another video that was just more confirmation of just how good God is and how much grace he gives people, including myself, who didn't know him for 37 years. And he still had me the whole time. And then when I finally accepted him, it just changed my entire perspective on my life, on others. And that's what upsets me so much about the people who are still in that church, who are being abused by the word of God, using Jesus Christ, who died for us. They're using him to just they have weaponized him, and they're destroying these people, because these people, there was a bigger church and they have come out, and there's a lot of damage and a lot of carnage that, God is not, God is bigger than all that. But if they're being told that this is what God is and this is how he is, I can see why people would say, well, if that's the love of Jesus, I don't want it, because of how bad it was in there.
Yeah.
And so they're able to just show me, and they live the love thy neighbor. They live it.
Yeah.
They don't just talk about it. And it's evident by the way they treat each other before we even got there.
Yeah.
It's just, and it doesn't, it is incredible to me just how much that place, the church that the people I love have come out of, and just how terrible they treat. No, and it's being real. See, that's the thing is, it's hard for me to just hold my tongue and just say how it is. It's a terrible place. The people in there, including the leadership who's doing the abusing, needs to just find the Lord Jesus Christ, surrender to him, repent, allow those people to just find Christ on their own. Get out of leadership if you're in leadership and just follow Christ. Let him lead.
Yeah.
Like you weren't in the other church.
Yeah.
You were not an exception. You were loved, no exception.
Yeah.
But before you were the exception.
Exactly.
You know, if the Bible talks about loving your neighbor without exception, and if that's the word that wants to be proclaimed there, you were the exception. You literally were the exception. We know other people who've been cut off because of whatever reason. So there is exceptions where in reality, according to the scripture and according to Jesus, there is no exception. So that's just another example of the hypocrisy of things, of saying one thing but then doing something
another, and people's
else.
experiences, and then there's like a disconnect, a cognitive dissonance. I know, so like in the church that my husband got saved in, or the Lord saved him through, I don't want to, like, I know there are other churches, and y'all even go to a different church than we go to, and they preach the word. So it's like I have this like response to acting like one church is the greatest church because of the way that we grew up. Like I'm like very anti that, because I think that there are a lot of apostate churches, but I think that there is a remnant of some churches that really do preach the word. I think the church we go to is one of them, thank God. And so, but I remember feeling like I was not claiming to be saved, right, at this point, but I also know a lot, I know a lot, whether it was right or like it wasn't. I'm learning, there's a lot to unlearn. But anyway, so I'm thinking he's lost and like doesn't know anything about anything with the gospel. And why is the church not like hounding him more? Like, why aren't they like, I feel like they should be pounding on him or like beating him down or like upset with him for going months and months without getting saved. Because my experience in the church I grew up in is that like if someone comes multiple times to church as a visitor and doesn't get saved, they kind of become a taboo visitor, right? Y'all notice that? Like I remember there was this one visitor.
I think like they'll say things like, well, they just don't want to accept.
Yeah.
And so things would change. Like they would tell people to treat them.
You had a timeline in there before you became like,
before you kind of
should have gotten saved by now.
Should have gotten saved. I mean, I remember one time, there was a visitor that I was bringing a lot, and her husband was coming, and he was an atheist, and I think this was his first time coming to church with her. And after the service, one of the pastors was like laying into me and some of the other young women about not evangelizing enough or something. And my mom was like, well, we had, visitors. And he was like, well, did he respond?
No,
he didn't respond. And I remember thinking, he literally, like, my husband didn't even know the words that a lot of the time, like even when he came, he didn't understand most of the word. He didn't know what the word redeemed meant. He didn't know what the word saved meant. He didn't know what 90% of the Bible stories, the blood was like weird to him. He's like, why are they talking about blood? Like how, like God's going to meet you where you are. And it's not always going to be this immediate thing. It might take time where the Lord has to really break through some things. And so I remember being so confused about that. So, but with Mike, I was like, why isn't the church hounding him more? Why aren't they, and I know that the pastor we met with, he shared the gospel with him, the full gospel. And I know that the narrative is that no one else does that, but It was the real gospel, the sin, the whole thing. But nobody sat him down and was like, have you lied? Have you done this? They didn't follow this like formula. But I was so amazed because I remember we went over to one of the counselors' houses. He's a younger guy, probably around our age.
Yeah.
Him and his family. They invited us over. And this is before you're saved.
Yeah.
This is while I'm still working through things. And you were sharing a lot. And this will always stick out in my mind. And you were sharing.
I didn't even realize I was doing this.
Yeah. He was just sharing about what he's been through and then what he's been seeing as he's been going to church and talking to people. And he was like, yeah, I used to think like, oh, I did this sin in the past and I did, no, you didn't call him sin. You were like, I used to, do this or drink or whatever. And he was like, and it wasn't really a big deal. But now I'm like, no, like I was a liar. I was a fornicator. I was a, whatever. And you were like, he was like listing out his sin as sin. No one had actually sat down and said, you are a big fat sinner, you big horrible person. No, but this is what we were like kind of taught we had to do was like beat it over your head. And if you didn't immediately repent right then, because they would remember the rule was like you get them to a point where they have to say yes or no. And if they don't say yes,
it would always change. That was one of the iterations.
There was
one
time.
Yeah,
there was. For a while that was the thing.
You had to tell them like. You had to make them say,
I reject Jesus Christ as my Savior or something.
I remember that.
So, like, I'm thinking this is what needs to happen. And then, literally, it was like this, like, huge thing for me because I'm still working through things. And I'm like, God showed him that. Like, literally no man sat there and laid it out for him. I remember when we were dating earlier on, he would talk about his past and I knew it was sin and I would kind of mention the word and stuff like that, but he wasn't seeing.
No.
But God showed him that. And it was not long after that that you then got saved after in one of the church services. And the change was like so dramatic that I have never seen a change like that in my life. Even going to this church where supposedly the church was one of the only places that real salvation happened. Dad said that all the time. You remember? Real salvation. We figured out real salvation here or something. But I had never seen a change. And I'm married to him, so I know him. And it really was huge for me because I realized God exists outside of this church that I went to. And that was huge because that was something I was still wrestling with, even a year and some later, was I still had this idea that like the real God only really was in that place. And they would probably tell you, we never said that. But the way that they acted, the way that they treated us, if you leave, all this, the assumption, it's really...
Well, the pastor emeritus at one point even said in one of our final years there, like this could be the only place left that the real gospel is preached. And they wouldn't like say it for a fact, but they would say things like that to get you to believe this really might be the only place.
And if you leave, you're leaving, you're lost, you are rejecting God. So why wouldn't you associate this place as the only place really where the real God is? And so I kept thinking or feeling that like, I don't know if I can really know God if I'm not in there. I don't really know if he can. And then I see God, the real God, change my husband in a way that I'd never seen. And it wasn't anything that someone was forcing him to do. There were no expectations put on him to change things afterwards. Like I remembered when people would get saved in there would be kind of these expectations that, well, you're going to want to do this, or you're going to be like this, or you're not going to want to do this.
Because they wanted a certain behavior from that person.
Exactly. None of that was put on him. And yet, so for instance, you used to always listen to like hip hop and rap and stuff. Not that those are horrible things or something, but he would always do that when he would work out. And then I remember it was only like a couple weeks and you started finding Christian hip hop and Christian rap. And I remember it was one time at the gym, you got home from the gym and you're like, yeah, the other that music just doesn't hit anymore.
It wasn't hitting like it used
doesn't
to.
hit the same. And so he started listening to the Christian music, or like, it's just like when the Bible says our eyes are blind, but then they're opened.
Yeah.
It was literally that happened in a way. And maybe also it was so dramatic because he had never really experienced anything with Christianity. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of like, it was like what he didn't understand, even when we would talk before he got saved, suddenly it was all clear.
And I didn't know any better. But then coming to Christ, it's just like, it's undeniable that we are loved, each and every one of us, because if he can love me through all the things that I have done, grown up with, done, as a kid, as an adult, no one is beyond. And I know it sounds crazy to hear, but it's true. It is. Just give it to Christ, give it to Jesus, let him. Put your burdens onto him.
Yeah, because and that's where like grace was so huge for me to realize, like, it isn't anything we can do. Mm-hmm. Salvation is not of us. Salvation is literally receiving and taking God at his word, that when we do confess with our mouth and believe in our heart, he does the work. It's nothing I can do. I cannot do jack squat, but I get to receive. And I remember when I'm studying the word, that I like realized for the first time, even though we grew up in church, it was like God almost showed me where he was like, the cross, God poured all the wrath that ever was and ever would be for every sin that ever was on Jesus. And boom, it was done. And all we have to do is actually just accept that and believe it and believe in him. There's nothing else to like. The work's been completely done, and that's funny because I could guarantee you people in there would say, "Well, we've said that," but it was like my mind was like cloudy in there, where like I couldn't think clearly, I couldn't process things clearly. I don't really know, but I never really got that.
And well, yeah, then it had like a different. And I would venture to say, people maybe it just was specifically how you were abused.
Yeah.
Because they didn't go after that specific part in me like they did in you.
Yeah.
And that's where.
And so like when you're saying that, I'm like, yeah.
Right.
Like I'm like, yes, that is the whole. But knowing you and your full story now, this is a very precious realization for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, very important and very thankful.
Yeah.
I think it's really 100%. Important too for everybody that is still in there, or anybody that is in a situation that's similar, to know like you really, something that is looked down upon is critical thinking. But something that's very important is that if you see something that is being said and you see something that is being done and they don't match up, critical thinking is very important to realize these things don't match up. So look at, if you're listening to this and you've been in the church that we're talking about, or you've been in a similar one, and you've heard forever, by grace you're saved, it's only not by works, it's through the blood of Jesus, all that stuff, you've heard all of the things that she just said and all of those things, but then you've also seen, either in your life or in other people's lives, how it's not that way. How you, maybe because of the sin, or because you like this thing, or whatever it is, you're not saved, or the blood is sufficient for that, but you're lost again somehow, or whatever the thing may be.
A certain amount, or
you really need to look at what is being said versus what is actually being lived out and walked out, because and don't like throw down your critical thinking. Don't let people say that like you can't think that, you can't question that, you can't whatever. But be careful if you do question it to the leaders in there or wherever you are, because they will, either you're going to be lost again, or they're going to try to twist it in a way to where you can question it. But of course, we never do any of these things, or these things aren't. This is how
they'll gaslight you.
Yeah, and they'll say, no, it was always the people's fault who twisted it that way.
It was Kristen's fault. No, it wasn't.
No, it's not.
No, it wasn't.
And you know it by your own experience. And so let that be what
Yes.
shows you what you're
And
realizing is
like
right.
we have our own sin that we're accountable for.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, these thought processes, the cognitive dissonance, the confusion, I did not choose
Create that.
I did
Yeah.
not create that. I was responding to people who were in positions of authority and power when I was very young.
Very young.
All of us were
Your
very
whole life.
young. So
It was
our
your whole
minds
life.
were molded. And so, yes, my responses to them were going to be, well, you're right. You represent God, and I'm going to put all of my trust and expectation in what you're saying, regardless of whether or not there's another part of me that's like, well, that doesn't really make sense, or that doesn't really even seem to be what the word says. Like,
And
I
they
remember reading the Bible and thinking, wow, God is so much nicer than what I think he is.
But the thing is, too, is we couldn't, even if we didn't understand, we had to stand under. So it was this whole thing about, like, even if we didn't understand what was being said, we had to just submit to it no matter what, and look at what was being said versus what's being done. And then also just realize that there is not just one church or one place that preaches the gospel, and that you can go to other places, talk to other people.
Yeah.
And you leaving that place does not mean that you're hateful,
lost,
or lost.
Any of that.
It means that you need to go to a different place.
Yeah. And we miss and love, if any of y'all do watch, we miss and love y'all, and would love to be able to have relationships restored. And we
thank you again for listening. It was nice having y'all on with us this time. And we'll probably do it again soon.
Yeah.
But thank you, and we'll be back again soon.
Bye.
Bye.